When I was a child, I would visit my sisters where they lived in Chelsea, London. It was very exciting for me, travelling down on the bus by myself from the north. One vivid memory was my older sister's edition of Hollywood Babylon by Kenneth Anger. This to me was a looking glass into another time and another world, one which I barely imagined could have existed. A sordid behind-the-scenes peek at the golden age of Hollywood stars' lives. Forget London, I couldn't put the book down. Many years later I found out that Mr. Anger probably used a little artistic license while detailing his cult confection. When I learned of this, I was not the slightest disappointed, for any great artist will embellish to create a work that stands out from the mundane. Of course, many of the personalities he featured may not have felt the same. Nevertheless, I am indebted to him for introducing me to a different kind of history, far more interesting than anything my history teacher taught. The following account is inspired by my early fascination with the dark side of Tinseltown, so artfully conjured by Kenneth Anger. When famous actors are caught doing terrible things, some of us might be horrified. Some might tend towards indignation, but there can't be many who are shocked or surprised. We also tend to think that cancel culture is a new phenomenon. But 101 years ago, the Fatty Arbuckle scandal showed that the adoring public were quite willing to change to polar opposites if their idols' off-screen lives didn't match their on-screen image. Indeed, that particular case changed the way the public saw the movies and the people in them, and forced the young Hollywood film industry to take the first steps towards self-censorship in an effort to reassure everyone that it wasn't teeming with lust-crazed hedonists. One of the first things the film industry did in its efforts at damage control was to literally cancel Fatty Arbuckle, and very swiftly at that. Roscoe Arbuckle was born in 1887 in Smith Center, Kansas. He was a big bouncing 13 pounds, and his father William was suspicious of his paternity from the get-go, because both he and Arbuckle's mother were very slender. The disapproving father permanently engraved his disdain on his son by naming him after Senator Roscoe Conkling, a notorious womanizer and a politician whom William despised. The birth was traumatic for Mary and resulted in chronic health problems that contributed to her death 11 years later. Historians hypothesize that William was probably a high-functioning alcoholic. He was rarely with his family, and he beat Roscoe regularly, and eventually deserted them altogether. When Roscoe's mother passed away, the desperate boy travelled to the hotel where his father and older brother worked, only to find them gone. The hotel was under new management, and the errant Arbuckles had left a week earlier. The hotel staff took pity on him, making up a nest in a tiny closet and providing food for him. After a few days, Roscoe realized that his father was not coming back to get him. He began doing odd jobs around the hotel in exchange for his room and board, and he never forgot or forgave his father for the hatred and abuse he had suffered at his hands. Roscoe apparently had a fine singing voice, which caught the attention of the hotel's musician, Pansy Jones. Pansy soon allowed the young Arbuckle to sing for tips on quiet nights. Bolstered by the encouragement he received from Pansy, he entered a local talent show for amateurs. The performers' acts were all judged in the antique way, that is to say, by the amount of cheering or heckling they received. If a performer didn't meet the crowd's approval, an appropriate response ensued, and if it was the latter judgment, the classic shepherd's crook emerged from the side of the stage and whisked them off, much to the delight of the audience. Unfortunately, chubby Roscoe's act didn't delight the crowd, and they began to boo and heckle him. When he saw the crook coming towards him, Roscoe, a surprisingly athletic and nimble man considering his proportions, raced away from the menacing device and did a perfect somersault directly into the orchestra pit. The mood of the audience shifted in that instant, and Arbuckle was a hit. Thus, a slapstick comedy career path was chosen for him. Eventually his father materialized again, and he was sent to live with him and his second wife. He would thrash Roscoe in alcoholic rages. His stepmother recalled once rescuing him when his father was choking him and beating his head against a tree. As a teenager he escaped his father by touring on the Pantages theatre circuit. In 1908 he met Minta Durfee, who was performing on the same bill in Long Beach, and they romantically got hitched on the stage of the Bide a While Theatre. In 1913, Arbuckle turned up hopefully at Keystone Studios, a comedy lot known as the Fun Factory, and the home of the eponymously named Keystone Cops. Studio head Max Sennett hired him for $3 a day. That first year, he acted in no fewer than 36 shorts, many of them opposite Keystone's leading lady and Sennett's lover, Mabel Normand. The next year, Charlie Chaplin, still developing his little tramp persona, joined the studio, and he and Arbuckle acted together in 7 films. Along with Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks, they were part of the first wave of movie stars to live like and be covered by the media as American royalty. By 1915, the fan magazine Photoplay was breathlessly detailing Arbuckle's ideal dinner, a menu that included crab meat cocktail, a dozen raw oysters, fried salmon steak, roast turkey, Hungarian goulash, Roquefort cheese with crackers, and cold artichokes with mayonnaise. How did the moniker Fatty become attached to Arbuckle? Well, he acquired the name in school when he was just 8 years old. and by the age of 12 he was almost 200 pounds and more than 5 feet tall. Did he like the moniker? In a word, no. At the height of his fame, after many of the aforementioned favourite menus, Roscoe weighed close to 300 pounds. Despite the fact that his size was part of his on-screen persona, he was very self-conscious about his weight. His father had severely dented his confidence, calling him names and fixating on his size. Roscoe complained that Fatty was a childish nickname, unsuitable for an adult man, and he resented the way the movie studios always listed him as Fatty, or when he played a woman, Miss Fatty. Fans would call him Fatty, or sometimes the Prince of Wales, or the Balloonatic. He would angrily object, saying, "I got a name, you know." He was quoted as saying, "I refuse to try and make people laugh at my bulk. Personally, I cannot believe that a battleship is a bit funnier than a canoe, but some people do not feel that way about it." Often comedy actors will have an on-screen persona which is the complete opposite to their real selves. Roscoe was such an example, and because of his self-consciousness about his weight and shyness, he often used alcohol and extravagant gestures, like buying everyone drinks, to be popular and mask the discomfort he felt about his appearance. The following year, Paramount poached Roscoe by offering him his own production company, Comic Film Corporation, and a base salary 7 times what he made at Keystone. This required him to renege on a smaller deal that would have included his wife, and Dufay was so upset with him betraying her that the couple drifted away from each other. Paramount sent its new prize on a 23-stop publicity tour. As the director of his own pictures, Roscoe brought on the younger comedian Buster Keaton, who became his frequent co-star and lifelong defender. United Artists, an actors' collective which was premised on allowing actors to control their own interests rather than being dependent upon commercial studios, burst onto the scene. Paramount panicked amid rumors that Arbuckle might join them, so they showered him with cash in a deal that paid $3 million in the course of 3 years. Roscoe Arbuckle embraced a lifestyle to match his newfound wealth. He bought a mansion, luxury cars, and, briefly, a baseball team, the Pacific Coast League's Vernon Tigers. But, overnight, the roly-poly favorite, adored by children across America, became public enemy number 1. And people were literally spitting in his face. Roscoe had just completed 3 films back to back. His friend, Fred Fishback, insisted he needed to get away, so he booked hotel suites in San Francisco and arranged an epic 3-day party over Labor Day. Despite Roscoe suffering burns on his buttocks from accidentally sitting in acid shortly beforehand, the party went ahead. There's a scene about 7 minutes into the 1915 silent film short Mabel and Fatty Viewing the World's Fair in San Francisco, where the camera pans right, across, and up the facade of the St. Francis Hotel. If the audience knows where to look, they can just make out the window of room 1219. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle would come to regret ever having seen that suite. What happened there during the booze-filled revelry bankrupted him and destroyed his career in one fell swoop. On September the 3rd, he and friends Lowell Sherman and Fred Fishback made the long drive from Los Angeles to San Francisco, checking in to 3 connecting rooms at the St. Francis. Prohibition had been the law since 1919, but there were always ways around that pesky obstacle. Among the guests was Virginia Rappe, a 30-year-old actress who suffered from chronic cystitis, a bladder inflammation. Virginia and her friend, Bambina Maud Delmont, reached the party at 10:30 a.m. Virginia's manager and Fatty's friend, Al Semnacher, accompanied the women. 10 minutes later, more revelers joined, including showgirls Zay Privon and Alice Blake. Rappe, with her piercing brown eyes, lustrous hair and dazzling style, had found work both as a model and an actor, appearing in 13 movies, including the 1970 short His Wedding Night, alongside Arbuckle. Virginia's fiancé would later claim that Virginia was revolted by Fatty, who behaved in a crude and classless manner. He said she was utterly unaware that Fatty would also attend the party. But he was there, and Virginia and company drank bottomless gin blossoms until everybody forgot their prejudices. Virginia was feeling unwell by that afternoon. She excused herself to rest in Fatty's private suite, but according to party guest Maud Delmont, Arbuckle strong-armed Virginia into his room with the sinister utterance, "I've waited for you 5 years, and now I've got you." Fatty allegedly locked the door behind him. Whatever happened behind that locked door is a mystery. At some point, Arbuckle and Rappe ended up together in a bedroom from where, a few minutes later, her piercing screams were heard. Bambina Maud Delmont, who had accompanied Virginia to the party, went to check on her friend. Arbuckle answered the door wearing only his pajamas and a robe. He smiled crazily and looked towards Maud. Behind him, Virginia lay on the smaller of the 2 beds, writhing in pain and tearing at her clothing. These statements were provided by Maud Delmont to police officers investigating the case. "He did this," Virginia screamed and pointed at Arbuckle. "He hurt me. I'm dying." Al Semnacher arrived on the scene and suggested an ice bath to sober her up. Al and Maud gave Virginia an ice bath, but it only made her pain worse and her screams louder. Maud even rubbed ice over Virginia's painful belly. Arbuckle, according to Maud, muttered a threat about Virginia being too loud. "Shut her up or I'll throw her out the window," Maud alleged. He left the room instead and went back to his drunken party and danced while poor Virginia lay dying. Maud spent the day nursing her friend, who drifted in and out of consciousness. Fatty and his pals checked out of the hotel early and sailed down California's central coast to Los Angeles. Virginia's lucid moments were marked with agony and screaming. Despite 2 hotel in-house doctors examining her and not finding the cause of her misery, her condition worsened and Virginia needed more help than they could offer. However, a trip to the hospital would likely result in a visit by the police, and there was no time to clean up evidence of illegal alcohol. When she was finally taken to hospital, instead of a proper hospital, they brought Virginia to the Wakefield Sanatorium, which served as a maternity hospital and sometimes abortion clinic. Dr. Rumfeld, a known abortionist, examined her. Alcohol poisoning was the initial diagnosis. Maud told the doctor Arbuckle had raped Rapay. A medical examination allegedly found no evidence of sexual assault. Virginia's condition continued to decline over the next few days, despite treatment. During wakeful moments, Virginia told her nurses that Fatty did this to her. She slipped into a coma and died on September the 9th, 1921. Immediately, Dr. Rumfeld and Dr. Orphus performed an autopsy, at the request of friends of the deceased. The doctors confirmed that Virginia had a ruptured bladder. In their expert opinions, the injury to the bladder was between 1 and 12 days old. It appeared distended but also exposed to force. The doctors removed her stomach and sent it to the city chemist for testing. They also removed some of Virginia's reproductive organs and instructed an orderly to incinerate them. The orderly was stopped just in time. The state of California requires a coroner to perform all autopsies when the manner of death is unclear. The Rumfeld and Orphus autopsy was completely unauthorized. During the party, witnesses recalled that a drunken Virginia complained she could not breathe and then started to remove her clothing. This was apparently not the first instance of Virginia Rapay stripping while intoxicated. One newspaper even dubbed her an amateur call girl who used to get drunk at parties and start to tear her clothes off. Arbuckle testified that he had gone into his bathroom and found Virginia already there on the floor, vomiting. He said that she was hysterical and he only washed her face and laid her on the bed. It wasn't his fault that she tore her clothing to shreds, he said. After helping her onto the bed, he and several other guests summoned the hotel doctor, who determined that Rapay was just heavily intoxicated, and took her into another hotel room to sleep it off. Newspapers across the country preferred Maud Delmont's claims. Some claimed that the overweight Arbuckle had damaged Rapay's liver by crushing her while trying to have sex with her, while others offered up increasingly outrageous stories consisting of various depravities supposedly carried out by the actor. Rapay was portrayed as the pure young beauty ravaged by the beast. It didn't help that the name Virginia Rapay so closely resembled virgin rape. Arbuckle was gleefully described as filled up with liquor, the Dayton Daily News declared. His low bestiality asserts itself in treating a woman like a grizzly bear would a calf. William Randolph Hearst happily noted that the scandal had sold more papers than the sinking of the Lusitania. In her affidavit, Maud Delmont recalled hearing the brutalized Virginia scream, "He did it! I know he did it! I have been hurt! I am dying!" Delmont was never actually called to the stand because prosecutors knew her testimony would never hold up in court due to her ever-changing stories. Nicknamed Madame Black, Delmont already had a reputation for procuring girls for Hollywood parties, using those girls to instigate scandalous acts, and then blackmailing celebrities anxious to keep those acts quiet. It also didn't help Delmont's credibility that she'd sent telegrams to attorneys saying, "We have Roscoe Arbuckle in a hole here, chance to make some money out of him." Al Semnacher had one important recollection. He recalled that Fatty had told him he had placed a piece of ice inside Virginia's vagina. He was asked to repeat the statement in Fatty's exact words. Al couldn't bring himself to repeat the words. Instead, he wrote them down. The DA read them out loud. He said he'd put a piece of ice in Virginia Rappé's snatch. The defense suggested that Semnacher had conspired to extort Arbuckle, and got him to hesitate as to whether the ice was put in or on Rappé's genitalia. Zay Provost remembered Arbuckle putting ice on her abdominal region to help revive her. But the story was too salacious to ignore, and it morphed into the myth that Arbuckle, possibly owing to impotence, had violated Virginia with a Coke or champagne bottle. Arbuckle's lawyers showed the court that the autopsy had concluded that the official cause of death was a ruptured bladder and secondary peritonitis, and that there were no marks of violence on the body, no signs that the girl had been attacked in any way, and various witnesses corroborated the actor's version of events. Virginia's grieving fiancé said under oath that he would kill Fatty on sight if he didn't get convicted. It took 3 trials before Arbuckle was acquitted, after the first ended with a hung jury. The jury who acquitted him felt obliged to read out an apologetic statement that concluded with, "We wish him success and hope that the American people will take the judgment of 14 men and women that Roscoe Arbuckle is entirely innocent and free from all blame." But it was already too late. Hollywood's highest paid star was now box office poison. His movies were pulled from cinemas, and he never worked on screen again. After being charged with rape and manslaughter, and watching his career and significant fortune vanish over the course of 3 expensive trials, despite being acquitted of the crimes he was accused of, Arbuckle was ruined. Although he worked towards a comeback for the rest of his life, he also fell into heavy drinking. Arbuckle's first wife, Minta Durfee, commented that Roscoe only seemed to find solace and comfort in a bottle in those later years. He began working as a director under a pseudonym, William Goodridge, but he didn't have the same fervour as before. According to actress Louise Brooks, who worked with him on one film, Arbuckle made no attempt to direct this picture. He sat in his chair like a man dead. He had been very nice and sweetly dead ever since the scandal that ruined his career. Arbuckle married his third wife, Adie MacPhail, in 1932. The two then began planning a vaudeville tour that Arbuckle hoped would re-establish him as a popular performer. The plan appeared to be working. After a performance in 1932, Arbuckle was contacted by Jack Warner, head of Warner Brothers. Warner offered him an acting job in a short film under his own name. After making a series of comedy shorts for Warner, the studio offered Arbuckle a contract to appear in new feature films. Understandably, he was elated. After signing the contract, he reportedly said, "This is the best day of my life." Roscoe Conkling Fatty Arbuckle went to his suite at the Park Central Hotel in a joyous mood. Later that evening he retired to bed and never woke up. He had died of a heart attack in his sleep. He was just 46 years old and was on the verge of the comeback he had been chasing for more than a decade.
This month's devoted patrons: Cheryl Dutter, Laura Jane, Hippie of the Sea, Bonita Martin, Susanna Andrea, Shelley Valadez, Laverne Hicks, Renee Poulin, Erica McKinney, Amy Stringfellow, Taffy Gries, Rebecca Norton, Jay Etchells, and Kelly Cortesis. I hope I pronounced those correctly. Apologies if I haven't.
Well, my friends, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And what do you think? Did Fatty Arbuckle have anything to do with the death of Virginia? Or was he entirely innocent? The only person who really knows what happened is Virginia herself, and she and all the others are not around to tell the truth. I personally believe that he was innocent, that he didn't have anything to do with the injuries she received. First of all, you have this Maud Delmont who is very devious and wants to set these actors up, and of course he was a prime target. He had a lot of money. My theory is, of course, it's just a theory. I wasn't there. I'll never really know the truth. My theory is that Virginia Rappe recently had an abortion at the hospital she was taken to, that the botched abortion had caused these injuries, and that Maud Delmont knew about it and were hoping to lure Fatty into a trap where they could blame the injuries on him, but not realizing that she was actually dying of blood poisoning from the botched operation. The injuries that you see on the autopsy or the morgue photo of Virginia, the bruises on her arms, well, that's quite easily explained, as they were helping her up onto the bed, or Fatty was helping her up onto the bed, where he found her on the bathroom floor. The person who was making all the malicious statements was Maud Delmont herself, whereas the other people corroborated Fatty's story. I mean, it shows me that Maud Delmont was devious and was using her injuries, her abortion injuries, to try and benefit her mostly, and, pay Virginia for doing so. What I find really sad is that Fatty saw William Randolph Hearst as a friend, and he couldn't believe that he would be so betrayed But of course, William Randolph Hearst was cold-blooded. He wanted to make money and sell the story, and he was quite prepared to sell him down the river, which is what he did. Now, he was really broken-hearted after that. If he did commit a crime against this young woman, then of course terrible, and he will pay the price. The universal law of karma always finds a balance. But I don't believe he did it. Let's have a look at some information that I have found. Okay, this is from a site called Doctors Without Borders. The title of the article is Unsafe Abortion, a Forgotten Emergency. This is about the injuries that can be caused with abortions carried out by people who are not qualified. And this is happening now, by the way, in certain countries. This one, I believe, is about Congo, Colombia, Greece, and Mozambique. So let us scroll down and find out what sort of injuries could be caused by a botched abortion. The woman or girl may have consulted an unskilled provider or attempted the abortion herself. The history of unsafe abortion is marked by dangerous methods, including the use of sharp sticks inserted through the vagina and cervix into the uterus, ingestion of toxic substances such as bleach, herbal preparations inserted into the vagina, infliction of trauma such as hitting the abdomen or falling. Many of these methods are not even effective in terminating the pregnancy but can leave lasting damage. In the operating theatre, examining many of these women, I found trauma marks on the cervix caused by objects such as sticks. So is it possible, maybe she didn't have the abortion done at the hospital she was delivered to, but did Maud Delmont know about the botched abortion and decided to take her to a maternity abortion clinic? Perhaps she went to a backstreet doctor and he did something like that and injured her, and the injury was enough to cause the peritonitis, which led to her death. Or should I say actually the ruptured bladder which caused the peritonitis that caused her death. This is my theory, and I found something else quite interesting about Virginia herself and her behavior sometimes. I don't know what to make of it, but let's have a read of this. So this is an article I found, the Washington Times, 1921. Fatty hopeful, jail doors will open to liberty. Former sweetheart of Rappe girl testifies she had previous spells. This is something that is not mentioned in any online research about her. Found this scrolling through microfiche while researching. The defense has established these main points in its case through medical testimony that the rupture which resulted in Virginia Rappe's death might have come from other causes than external violence, as alleged by the state. 2. That Miss Rappe's actions in tearing off her clothing and shrieking from pain following her discovery in room 1219 at the St. Francis Hotel was one of a long series of such occurrences, one witness going back 10 years. That Miss Rappe was so roughly handled by her friends in endeavouring to render her first aid that her injuries might have been suffered in that manner. 2 new witnesses, Mrs. Florence Bates and Philo McCullough, both of whom testified to having seen Miss Rappe tear her clothing when in pain. The state pressed him hard as to dates on which he declared Miss Rappe had suffered great pain and tore her clothing. He stated that the attacks usually followed partaking of liquor. What was going on there? Barker today told of another occasion on which he said Miss Rappe had been seized suddenly with violent pains. This, he said, was at a dinner at Rector's, Chicago. Well, isn't that strange? So what do you make of that? I'm asking you guys. What do you make of that? Why would alcohol suddenly cause her to be in immense pain and to cause her to tear her clothes off? What would you feel that your skin is burning and the clothes are so irritating? I'm totally baffled by that one. I need your help on this. I have no idea what would cause that. Why would she be in pain from drinking alcohol? And if she did get into such pain from drinking alcohol, why on earth did she do it? I find that very mysterious. What would cause you to rip your clothes off? The only thing I know is hypothermia, when people feel that they are actually boiling hot, whereas in actual fact they're freezing to death. Most peculiar. Let me know what you think about that. Before I go, just want to make a comment about the press. I found this article here. This was before the case had come to court. Murdered woman's funeral Monday. Now, they don't even know that she'd been murdered. The case has not been even heard, and yet they have basically accused Fatty Arbuckle of murder. Murdered woman's funeral, and then they mention Fatty Arbuckle being arrested, etc. That they'll laud a person, they'll sing the praises of a person while things are going well for that person. As soon as there's any scandal, whether they're innocent or guilty, they're at their throat, the press. They're attacking them. Absolutely shocking, really. I mean, they basically condemned him in the eyes of the public, even though in all probability he was innocent. I think it might have been a terrible injustice, really. The connivings. When you have money, there's a lot of people who want that money off you. Not a very enviable position, really. Better to be rich and anonymous than to be rich and famous, because there's always going to be people conniving to get your money, to ruin you, perhaps, in the process. On that note, my dear friends, I would love to know your insights into this case, your thoughts. Thank you, as always, for watching and listening. Take care, God bless, and see you next time. Oh yes, while researching and rummaging, I found this article. I believe it's from 1971, if I remember correctly when I saved it. For the benefit of those who have visual impairment, I'm going to read it out to you. Fatty Arbuckle's old Long Beach home site in development. Fatty Roscoe Arbuckle lived here. The famous Fat Man, comic of silent movies, once owned the property where construction has begun on the new Ocean Queen Apartments, 18030E Ocean Boulevard, Long Beach. Arbuckle, living in a mansion-style home with horse stables at the cliff bottom, ran his horses nightly along the Long Beach coastline. A tunnel extended from his property to the ocean under neighboring homes. It measured about 7 feet in height and 4 feet wide. Since being filled in, many speculations have been made as to why the secret tunnel was there. Fellow movie stars lived in the surrounding houses. The 60-unit all-electric apartment building replacing the Arbuckle home will reach 4 stories. Well, that's all. We don't need to know that. What we want to talk about is that tunnel. My goodness. Why was that tunnel there? I mean, measuring 7 feet in height and 4 feet wide, I mean, that must have took a long time to build. How did he get planning for that? That's unusual. Was he running bootleg liquor? That sounds the obvious reason for such a tunnel going down to the beach, to the ocean. Isn't that weird? I think it was obviously during the time of the Prohibition and he was running bootleg liquor. What reason would you think he would have a tunnel? Would it have been even possible to construct a tunnel like that, even back then, without government officials knowing about it? Would that be possible? I mean, was it dug out with mechanical diggers? Did they do it by hand? It's just insane. Did the government officials know about it? Were they paid off to turn a blind eye? Were the other homes already there when he had that tunnel constructed under them? Very peculiar, my dear friends. I would love to know your feedback on this, and on that note, it is definitely tatty bye and God bless.